Can I make someone else the co-host so that they can admit people?
I think I'm the only one else available to do it, but I don't know how to do it.
Okay. Yeah, so while I'm talking, I didn't want to also have to be admitting people. If you're okay with that, Gregory, that would be great. I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, but I don't know what to do.
All right, if you're the co-host, you are able to.
Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started in the interest of time. So first off, I want to say hello and welcome to everyone. Thank you for being here with us and our first Beyond 21. And just to give you a quick recap of sort of how this came about. And so, as you guys probably know, what's been going on throughout our country over the past year in response to YWCA has began a 21-day challenge where we go through different topic areas every day for 21 days to help educate people around racial justice and equity issues. And so we felt that this was a great time for us to not just stop at the 21 days, but let's go beyond that and learn a little bit more because you clearly cannot learn all of history around race in America in 21 days. And so this is our opportunity to dive deep into new areas that we did not get to explore during the 21-day challenge and to continue that education moving forward. And so I am going to just briefly introduce Sonia. Known her for, oh man, how many years has it been?
Ooh,
It's
probably a decade
it's
at least.
probably now that you put a number on it. Oh my gosh. So it's been that long, but it has been a literal pleasure every moment of it. There are very few people hold at such high regard, academically, as a person, professionally, as Sonia. And the fact that she is on here is like a rock star to me, that she's able to come and talk about it. I mean, like, who does computer science and law? Like, that's just like, it blows my mind. Just on top of that, like, who does those things? But she did it and she's amazing at it. And I'm super happy that she's here to talk with us about her latest paper and to help us to dive deep into this issue as we sort of go beyond the 21 days. And so thank you, Sonia, for being here. It's a pleasure. I'm going to turn it over to you for you to go ahead and to dive into your area of expertise as we all learn a little bit more about racial equity and what we can do to begin to move the conversation forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that introduction. I really appreciate it. I hope you don't mind that I geek out a bit on this stuff that I get to play with. That's what I'll kind of call it. And it's great to meet all of you virtually. I'm a professor at the University of New Mexico, so I'm used to talking all the time. I'm more than happy to see you throw some comments in the chat. And Natalie, do you prefer that people ask questions as we go, or do you want to hold them till the end? What are you feeling?
That is up to you. I know you like to do a little more interactive, and if
Okay.
that works for you, that's fine with me.
All right. Yeah. So so I'm a professor. I'm not fancy at all. If you've got a comment, throw it in the chat. I'm since I'm not completely hosting everything, if you want to say something, you can feel free to unmute and jump right in. And yeah, but throw it in the chat. I've got it open to kind of keep my eyes on it. And let me start babbling away because I already have too much to tell you. I know you're not supposed to start a talk by telling people that you already have too much to say, but I guess I'll start there. Um, I'm so honored to be here with you and to get this time to talk about my scholarship. This is a paper. I'm waiting for the publication to come out in the next couple of weeks so I can be promoted. I have to make sure the provost can see that I've done my due diligence. So, but I'm really excited about this topic, and I'm really glad for the work that the YWCA of Miami has been doing on this. As I can just be very, very clear, someday you're really going to want me in person in Miami to do this talk. Don't worry, I've got my vaccine. I'm happy to get on a plane and get out to you guys any moment. Just let me know when you need me out there. But I just want
Definitely.
to I want to start by saying I'm a member of the Interdisciplinary Working Group on Algorithmic Justice, and this group of my colleagues and we do talks about this, about artificial intelligence in a number of different capacities all over the nation. And who we are is, this is kind of our mission, right? We identify mathematical, computational, political, and legal implications of algorithms and data that determine the fate of people in the criminal justice system and other public sectors. And these are the four things that we really focus on: ensuring that AI is correct, transparent, explainable, and accountable. So we're all members of the Santa Fe Institute, of University of New Mexico Computer Science Department, University of New Mexico School of Law, UNM Department of Political Science, and the UNM Center for Social Policy. And we talk and present and write legal arguments and kind of write comments in a lot of different places. Our real goal is to act as a resource to policymakers, stakeholders, and to do something about demystifying algorithms and explaining their strengths and weaknesses and how they can be used and deployed in the public sector. With that being said, I'm also a member of the Civic Data Library Context. I'm one of their advisors, and this is the group out of Washington, D.C. It's a nonprofit organization that wants to create technology and supports applied practices that promote equity and democratic values. And their vision is to demonstrate the power and potential of collaborative systems owned entirely in the public interest. So I've really been working to connect myself with the tech community and really be purposeful about showing these connections between tech and law. But the most interesting thing about me is that I am a blurred. So what is a blurred? If you don't know, a blurred is a black nerd. This is someone that loves Wu-Tang and likes Game of Thrones and likes to talk about coding. So you'll probably see some references here. I watch way too much TV. I read way too many comic books. And I like to find ways where I think these things actually connect into the law. So with that being said, I dedicate this work and this presentation to George Junius Stinney Jr. Does anyone know who George Stinney Jr. is? Has anyone heard his name before? And you can throw it in the chat or you can unmute. Anyone ever heard of George Stinney? Okay. George Stinney Jr. Was playing in a field with his sister when two young white girls came upon him. This was in 1944, and asked a question of him and his sister, and he and his sister responded, and they went on playing, and the girls went on playing. And shortly afterwards, the two young girls were found murdered. Within days, he was arrested, convicted, and executed. It was found 70 years later that that conviction was overturned. George Stinney Jr. is the youngest person to have ever been executed in the United States, and it has been determined through evidence that he actually did not murder those girls. He was so small when they electrocuted him that the Bible, they made him sit on the Bible so that so that he could be fitted under the hood to be electrocuted. I present this work on criminal justice reform in his honor and in honor of all of the people who have been wrongfully convicted and murdered by this country. With that being said, I also turn to this quote by Ida B. Wells Barnett. I think that Ms. Wells Barnett would appreciate my quest for transparency in algorithms. And you should know Ida B. Wells Barnett was an anti-lynching advocate. She went all over the world to address the number of unlawful and extrajudicial lynchings that were happening against Black men, women, and children in the United States. And Ida B. Wells Barnett said this quote: "The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them." And that really stands out to me. That really speaks to me as we think about this issue of artificial intelligence, about this thing happening that people cannot see that is making decisions. So TLDR, too long didn't read. What are we actually here to talk about? What is my big paper about? I wrote my paper on the legal implications. What are the legal implications if bad AI infiltrates risk assessment instruments used in criminal justice. So what we're going to do is try to unpack some of these things, right? What is AI? What is artificial intelligence? What are concerns about the use of artificial intelligence? What are criminal justice risk assessment instruments? And what are some legal implications for people harmed by AI in criminal justice? And then we'll kind of wrap up with this quest for justice. I'm already thinking, I'm like, shoot, I've already got too much to say. Hopefully we'll get it all in. But I am happy to talk about this stuff all day. I've got 85 other things that I'd love to also chat about, but I want to try and stay on these points. And if you see something, hear something, you're like, I really want to play with this idea a little bit more. Tell me more of where you got this information. Like I said, please go ahead and interrupt, because I think it's really important. And so with that being said, right, what are algorithms and justice? What is this bigger thing to think about? Well, algorithms are being used increasingly for high stakes decisions affecting lives and liberties. So algorithms are being used in housing and lending to determine mortgages, loans, and rentals. It's being used in financing, determining, once again, loans, mortgages, credit scores. It's being used in social services with child protective services. It's being used in education and rating teachers and rating schools. And, it's even been included, if you've looked a little bit into this SAT disadvantaged student metric. It's being used for college admissions. And the area where I've done most of my research is how algorithms are being used in criminal justice. So everything from pretrial to supervision and detention to sentencing, housing, classifications in prison, and parole. So what is an algorithm? Well, this is an example that I think starts to really make it very, very plain. And I don't want to assume where anyone is on this journey.
You have this.
Hey, you may want to mute. So what is an algorithm, right? An algorithm is technically, basically, a set of instructions to solve a problem, complete an action, or make a prediction. We use an algorithm. You used an algorithm this morning. Someone give me an algorithm you used this morning, no tech involved. Who's got an algorithm? Sorry, it's morning for me. I'm in New Mexico. Might be a little. Anybody here have to drive to work this morning? All right. Natalie, you used Google this morning. Some of you may have used an algorithm. You actually use an algorithm when you brush your teeth, right? You go into the place where you have your toothbrush. You use the hand that you probably always use. You picked up your toothpaste in a particular manner. Oh, that's good. Angelica, you used Waze app to get to work this morning. That's completely an algorithm. Some of you may be watching Netflix while at work, and Netflix is pulling out algorithms for you, brushing your teeth, driving your car, knowing the best route to get around if you run into traffic, using Waze. You are naturally using algorithms to solve problems, make predictions. Oh, I always know that if I leave home at 7:45, I'm going to run into X amount of traffic, so I need to leave by 7:40, right? Oh, that's good. MapQuest, right? That's what an algorithm is. We use them all the time in our own personal ways, and now technology is involved in using those algorithms also. So, for example, a recipe is an algorithm. And you can see this is a pretty standard recipe for making a 1-bowl chocolate cake the third. This is a fantastic, well-beloved recipe, and it's pretty straightforward, right? If I use all of the ingredients, follow the steps, I'm going to end up with a delicious piece of chocolate cake. But sometimes these algorithms can run into some problems. So for instance, this is what happens when you bake at a high altitude with a sea level recipe. Now, you guys are in one of my favorite states in the nation. My parents moved to Florida. I get there as often as I can around a global pandemic. And I've lived in Albuquerque, New Mexico, though, for the last 20 years. And I remember the first time I cooked my Southern grandmother's cream cake in New Mexico. It came out flat as a pancake. I didn't understand what was happening. And I had to learn that though this recipe produces the world's best cake in the state of Louisiana, in Florida, in New Jersey, everywhere else, this cake came out horribly because it didn't apply to where I was. This is some of the concerns with algorithms, right? That we have to be aware that there can be some complexities with the algorithms that are used. What we know is this thing called garbage in, garbage out. It's a well-known instance in technology and mathematics, right? If you put bad data in, you will get bad data out. And that also the output also depends on the context. Though I did all of the same steps, because it was not used in the right environment, it's going to lead to an outcome that I was not actually aiming for. This is what I have looked at studying, right? Which is related to this black box, right? This is what's so very fascinating. If you play in the world of technology, right, is that we have an input, it's going to go into a black box and it's going to create some kind of an output. And artificial intelligence, machine learning, neural networks all work off of this format. And what is so exciting in so many instances is that we have provided the artificial intelligence, the algorithms, with some basic things about how we run our lives. And the AI is working to create something very close in replication to what we do. One area of concern is related to the understanding that when we are telling the computer who and what we are and what matters to us, we are already building in our biases, conscious and unconscious. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. And when we build in our unconscious biases, well, the AI is going to do exactly what we've been teaching it to do and understand. It's going to give us an output based on all of those historical things that we did. And so when you look at an algorithm, how does an algorithm fit into these things? Or what's the life cycle of AI and some of these things? And what we discover is that, well, there's a collection of data. There's how the algorithm is actually trained. There's the actual algorithm at work. That's where the black box actually falls in. How it is being used. And then of course, our feedback loop. How is it doing? We put this algorithm into practice. What is our actual outcome that we got? And a lot of attention is looked at these ideas of making sure the algorithm, once again, is correct, transparent, explainable, and accountable. A lot of attention is played to the bias related to how the algorithm is doing at work. My work will also looks into this, how the algorithm is trained and what it is doing, because that is another instance. And so you can imagine and you can see how instances of conscious and unconscious bias can happen at every one of the stages of these processes that we're looking at. Why is this such a big deal? Well, we'll play with some of these things, but here's the part that's really standing out to me. And I tell you the truth, I did not know I would become a tinfoil hat person, right? I did not know that I would get to a place where I'd say, whoa, 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 we're at a place of extreme concern, and we've got to be really cautious. I've got this dream that I tell my vice dean, tell me when it's time that I can teach conspiracy law 101. I've got a group of law students who say, I can't wait till you get to offer conspiracy law 101. Because as we kind of study and look at privacy law, we start to understand that there are some real concerns about the data and how it's used and where it goes, and what happens to the data and how it can be manipulated. So just some facts for you to be aware of, right? These are old, but still pretty, we are actually more extreme now than in 2019. But when we look at cybersecurity statistics for 2019, it takes half a year to detect a data breach. And 43% of all cyber attacks are aimed at small businesses. 91% of attacks launch with a phishing email. And 31% of organizations have experienced cyber attacks on operational infrastructure. 38% of global organizations claim that they are equipped and able to handle a complex cyber attack. Now, when you see a statistics that says 38% say they're ready, what does that tell us about the amount that are not ready? That's pretty sizable, right? So give me some examples of recent cyber attacks that we've had. Just the one in the last week. Give me, who's got a couple of major cyber attacks that have really caught United States national attention? And I know those of you on the East Coast or definitely lived. Oh, the pipeline, that gas pipeline. Um, that was pretty powerful, wasn't it, right? To kind of watch what happened along the East Coast because of that cyber attack that led to the shutting down of the gas pipeline, which led to reduction in gas production, which led to people putting gasoline in plastic bags and in hampers in a quest to I saw the most interesting things online. Cyber attacks, the 2016 election. That's actually pretty perfect, right? Oh, thank you, Perry, for catching that water treatment facility in Florida. That was very scary because it was over near where my parents are. But that there, hopefully many of you guys also saw that, right? Where there was a cyber attack launch that basically they just planned to poison the whole community by changing the levels of things in the water. What's that big one that hit our federal government besides the election just in the last year? What really has started to scare some people? Who knows that big one? DOD, Department of Energy, Department of Justice, Tre Treasury. What's the name of that? What was the name of that cyber attack? How many of you remember the solar wind cyber attack of last year? I know it got a little bit lost because it was unpacked during the 2020 election season. But oh my goodness, this was an attack that wasn't discovered until October. They know it happened sometime last February. It happened at SolarWinds, a third-party company. That's going to be a big deal later. It happened at SolarWinds, which was a third-party used company that was used by many parts of our federal government. Countless numbers of Fortune 500 companies, and this attack was embedded. They have no clue how much has been unpacked and taken and studied from that cyber attack, right? So that's one thing that concerns people. This is just on data. This isn't even getting to the AI yet, right? We're just talking about the data and how unsecure the data is. Now, here's a way of how AI works. It's pretty cool, actually. It's super cool. How many of you have ever heard of generative adversarial networks? This is a new type of way of how neural networks are trained and how the AI learns to do things. So I love this image because I think it makes it very clear to understand. We've got two neural networks that have to think. And the neural network is a detective. It is going to be given two sets of data. It's going to be shown something real and something fake. Now, it's going to get a sample of real data, and the generator is going to work. Basically, I like this image as the person blindfolded painting because they're trying to, as the generator network, to create the Mona Lisa out of simply white noise, just completely unknown things. And the generator is going to create something crazy, and the detective is going to say, that doesn't look like the Mona Lisa, send it back. And the generator, based off the feedback it gets from the detective, gets better and better and better until the generator can fool the detective to not tell the difference between the real data and the fake forged data. This is pretty cool, right? Think about it. And this is being used all the time. And there are actually some benefits to creating a fake world. We can, these are some places, right, of AI fabrication, synthetic voices, smart content, your ability to not have to actually write back a whole email to someone. You can just say thank you. It gives you some recommended choices of what to write back. I just bought some glasses from Zilly, and I use a virtual try-on tool for my glasses, the Snapchat filters that people use that are so very funny, image searches, speech recognition. These are all examples of how this generative adversarial networks are so really part of our modern day space. And here's an example of what it can do, right? It is given the data that we have. The goal is to create a woman with glasses. What data does the network have? Well, it knows what a man with glasses looks like. It knows to subtract man. It knows to add woman. And somehow it's going to make lots of different samples in a quest to create what a woman with glasses would look like. Pretty cool, right? I encourage you to check out this website. I want everyone to go here. It's called thispersondoesnotexist.com. And I encourage you to go here. It's one of my favorite websites to play with. And this is actually every person you will see when you go to that site does not exist. The AI figured it all out on its own to create people. It's super, super cool to think about how far the technology has come. But then we start to get to some interesting things about what it can create. So we've learned a lot, right? We're at a place where we've now been able to tell the AI to make me a bird with white and has a very short beak. Now, some of these pictures kind of scare me. I don't like too many, I'm a big fan of AI, of comic books, but some of these mutants are a little scary, right? Take a look at these pictures. This is what the AI is creating simply off of the text description. This is a small black bird with a white breast and white on the wing bars, right? It is learning to create, and you can see stage one, what it looked like, and then when it went in to kind of get sharper and crisper at making more of something that does not even exist. These are not even real birds. Now, sometimes the AI gets a little scary. These are drawings that people made, and the AI turned them into actual people. So it's pretty cool to kind of watch it on a lot of different levels, to be part of a society where this technology is being created. But what's concerning is where and how the generator's training set can get hacked. I always mess up if I try to actually click this, but if you notice where it shows if it shows what the noise is, there is a method and a way to hack the noise and to hack the generator and to hack that place where it is creating X of fake data, where you can slip in false information that doesn't appear to you and I when we are going to go back and review the code. What do I mean by that? What does it mean if there can be false ideas slipped into the system? Well, this is what happens when there is fake information put in. What do you see in these two pictures? This is an easy question, so don't work too hard. What do you see in these two pictures? Jump in on these are easy ones. It's a cat, right? It's a cat in picture one. It's a cat in picture two. What is the difference that is happening in these two pictures? Who sees them? What's the difference? That's right, right? The cat in the first image on the left is just looking straight ahead, but the cat in the second picture has been angled. Well, what occurred is because of hacking, the first one, the AI was given the impression that this is not a cat, it is actually guacamole. And in the second picture, with the angling, it was able to determine that it was a tabby cat. Now, this seems pretty silly to you and I. How in the world does the technology not see that? Because there can be false data implemented into the system. Now, you'll look at this and you'll discover all kinds of kind of strange looking turtles, but we all get the impression that they are turtles. Well, when the AI was asked to determine what these images are, you'll notice that image 2 in the second picture in the first row, and then actually no, that's the only one. Yeah, the second picture in the first row. The AI saw that none of these were actually turtles. In fact, everything except for the second image was classified as a rifle by the artificial intelligence. The one that has the black around it, the second image in the first row, was classified as other by the AI. So it starts to get a little more concerning, right? What happens when this technology is being used to determine a person's access to liberty and justice and freedom, or in other kinds of ways? Now, these are the different ways that the AI has been hacked, the instances in which we're able to see the outcomes of the falsified data, and that there are these kind of quick determinations. But just as you can remember, how many of you remember what this is? What is this image in the middle? Who remembers? We used to always be mindful of these. And in fact, that's right, they're speed guns. These are radar detectors. This is a radar gun. And typically they're used by law enforcement to determine if people are speeding on the road. Well, some of you may remember what was created in response to the radar gun. What was created in response to the radar gun? Who knows? That's absolutely right. After that, we got the outcome of the radar detector. This is something people would put in their windows and in their car windows so that when you were on a long road trip, you would have to have a radar gun detector so that you could detect when there was a radar detector in use and you would know to change your speeding. What was created in response to the radar detector? The radar detector. In fact, many jurisdictions made it illegal for you to use a radar detector. So the law enforcement would have a radar gun and a radar detector in their windows so that they could either give you a ticket for speeding or give you a ticket for being within their jurisdiction using a radar detector. By using the radar detector. Well, what was made in response to that? the and yeah, they kept kind of searching within there. Well, law enforcement came up with the next one. This is the laser detector. Now they didn't have to use the radar gun. They had a new method in which to track people. What was made in response to the laser detector? The laser detector. What that lets us know, the laser detector, and what occurred, and the reason I like this example is that it reminds us that as fast as we think we're going to catch all of the hacking, to catch all of the cybersecurity risks, we are always going to be a step behind. Why does that matter? Because not only is there bias happening in the way AI is happening, and there's all kinds of things that I think about with my colleagues and this idea of how AI perpetuates bias and how the properties that algorithms actually need to try and mitigate AI bias and the things to think about when thinking about bias in AI. But in actuality, this system and this technology is being used in our criminal justice system. This is the part that catches me. I like to tell my students that family law is the area that wakes me up in the morning. I think it's the most exciting area of law. It's been my heart's desire to go to law school to study family law. I'm so honored I get to teach it and research on it and to have practiced in this work. I love family law. Family law wakes me up in the morning. Criminal justice keeps me up at night. You shouldn't be able to sleep with the things that are happening to people through the United States criminal justice system. It should make you sick to your stomach. And it shouldn't just be because of what happened so publicly with the murder of George Floyd. While everyone was required to stand and watch him be murdered because the step in would have meant taking their own life. It should make you have sleepless nights. I'm so glad that the YWCA has been doing this 21-day work about what's happening in our criminal justice system and about race in the United States. Because there's someone who is my first judge. Many times you'll hear people talk about the trial, or you'll hear people talk about different components of it. But in reality, there are ways where people have already pre-decided who I am and who I'm meant to be before we even get to what is formally our criminal justice system. There's community surveillance, and you've seen that in the news, and you've seen the power and implications of people with the power they have to pick up their phone and decide that someone does or doesn't belong, which leads to them being picked up into this system. But I argue that we've even got something earlier happening in who is my first judge in the criminal justice system. And artificial intelligence has become an even earlier decider before someone even gets into our formal systems. So what do I mean by that, right? How are algorithms being used in that larger criminal justice system? Well, risk assessment instruments take input about a defendant, for example, their criminal record. And based off statistical patterns in a data set of past cases, which would be considered a training data, they make assumptions that this defendant will have similar outcomes to defendants in the training data with similar records. The algorithms estimate the risk or probability that this defendant will have outcomes such as failure to appear in court, that they are more likely to commit new criminal activity, or recidivism used in parole, infractions for prisoners, etc. But we're aware that there are human choices that are used to determine what data to collect and what kind of patterns to look for. The part that stands out to me and where my research began and what caught my attention was a case that came out of Wisconsin in 2016. And it's State versus Loomis. And please forgive me for being a little bit law professory, but I want to give you some context of the case so you can get a picture of what was going on. So this was an instance of a risk assessment instrument that was used, and it was the risk assessment instrument used is called COMPAS, the Correctional Offender Management Profiling for Alternative Sanctions. Compass is a product, a software product by a third-party proprietary software company that was created to determine someone's eligibility for parole. It was created for the use of parole. But in this instance in Wisconsin, this software was being used to determine sentencing. It was being used to determine recommendations to the judge on what should be a recommended sentence. So we have Mr. Loomis, who was and the legal reason why this stands out is that we have a due process concern here, right? From the U.S. Constitution, the 14th Amendment, no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law. Where does due process come up here? Well, we're getting ready to determine whether or not Mr. Loomis should be incarcerated and his length of incarceration, and we're trying to determine if he actually had been provided a way to question and query the evidence presented against him. What Loomis argued is that by using this software, he had already argued he was driving a vehicle that was used in the getaway for a crime. He pled guilty, and we're now at the sentencing stage. We're at the sentencing stage, and the Compass software was used by the judge to make an argument for, based off of his history or based off of what's unknown, what kind of sentence he should be given. The judge got a number from the Compass product that said Loomis should be given this kind of sentence. The judge sentenced him to that, and Loomis and his attorneys presented before the court, the appeals court, and said, how in the world can he be sentenced to that number? The judge and the software knows nothing about him. His argument was that it violated his right to due process because he had a right to be sentenced based upon accurate information. And because Compass was a proprietary software, there was no way for him to ever determine if it was actually accurate in the number it gave for his recommended sentence of 3 years. He also argued that he had a right to an individualized sentence, not because of what others have done in the past, but something directly connected to the instance in which he had been found guilty. And he also argued that it was improperly used gendered assessment in sentencing. These were his arguments that he presented, and the big focus that I'm focused on was his talking about the technology and what it did. The prosecutor argued that, the judge had already made up her mind. The judge had already determined he just already had a high risk of violence, a high risk of recidivism. He was a high pretrial risk. And the circuit court denied his post-conviction motion. They said that the software said he was a high risk to the community. Well, how do we determine that he's a high risk to the community? The Wisconsin court got a ton of information. This is the Wisconsin Supreme Court, so it went up several levels. And the trial court judge argued, well, I just did, I was already going to give him that sentence. It just so happened to be that the software came up with the same answer. But as time went on throughout the trial and this trial at the Supreme Court, it was determined, the Wisconsin Supreme Court, that there are some real serious problems with the Compass software that was being used. This was the Wisconsin solution for what to do about this use of this proprietary software that was a black box that no one could see how it worked. Every judge, when using Compass, was required to review these 5 warnings from here on out. The risk scores may not be used to determine whether an offender is incarcerated or to determine the severity of the sentence. It could be used as a point of consultation by the judge. And these judges are to be read these warnings. The proprietary nature of COMPAS prevents the disclosure of how risk scores are calculated. COMPAS scores are unable to identify specific high-risk individuals because the scores rely on group data. And although COMPAS relies on national data sample, there has been no cross-validation study for an actual Wisconsin population. What do people in Wisconsin use? And that studies have raised questions about whether COMPAS scores disproportionately classify minority offenders as having a higher risk of recidivism. And COMPAS was developed to be used for post-sentencing determinations. Now, think about this, right? You don't use the algorithm you use to brush your teeth as the same algorithm you use to decide what route to take to work. So why would you use an algorithm developed for post-trial, for post-sentencing determinations, for instance, for parole, for something used in pre-trial sentencing or even for sentencing? And the bigger issue is that there are different legal protections for a person who has already been incarcerated versus someone who has not been actually convicted of a crime. So we have this idea of, I'm almost positive that the people creating this software did not go through and really think through the fact that there are different legal protections. There are different due process arguments that one can have. There are different equal protections that are in place for someone at different stages within the criminal justice system. How did the product actually work? Well, this is an example of what it does, right? It looks to determine if someone's low risk, moderate risk, or high risk. It gives an answer to the community, and then this is used to make determinations. And there are some real dangers, just as what the courts pointed out. Once again, we have no way to cross-validate it. The questionnaires that are completed are just things that are randomly pulled out. We know that people can have missing information in the questionnaires that other incarcerated people have answered, that issues on race can sometimes be entered by the actual person describing their race, which can be different from their street race, which can be different from the race that someone in the corrections system gives them. The defendants are given no ways of the explanation of why they fall into one of these categories or not, because it's proprietary software. And every state, when they enter and start using the COMPAS system, is giving that data away to COMPAS with no agreement to return the data to the people, or how that data is being used, or the numbers there. That all now belongs to COMPAS. So for all we know, COMPAS is using Florida data to determine Wisconsin. COMPAS is using New Mexico data to determine Colorado. We have no indication because it's a proprietary software. And there are some real dangers to this black box. So for instance, Glenn Rodriguez, and this was out of the New York Times just a couple of years ago, he was denied parole after COMPAS scored him a high risk. Well, it actually determined that someone had actually manually entered a wrong number into COMPAS. The prison staff said, oops, shoot, we made a mistake, we put in the wrong number, but COMPAS never updated the score. And since COMPAS is a black box, he was given no explanation. Well, Mr. Rodriguez went to the parole board and he said, he asked them, can you at least tell me what my score would have been if the data had been corrected? It would take over 2 years. And think about this, right? The parole board was presented evidence by the corrections facility personnel who actually said all the good that Mr. Rodriguez had done, all of his advancements, all the ways he was ready to re-enter society. But the parole board with their blinder said, but COMPAS said, that's not true. Even though they were told that the software was wrong because the data inputted into it was wrong. It would take him 2 years before he would be released. You may all be familiar with the ProPublica article that came out of a lot of great research that looked at a lot of things happening in Florida, actually. And here's an example of what COMPAS's outcomes were doing. And when asked, COMPAS could not explain why certain persons would be given a high risk versus low risk. So here are just 2 examples of Dylan and Bernard, one having prior offenses, different types of prior offenses, different types of subsequent offenses, one being labeled low risk and high risk. Looking at Gregory and Mallory, and it's quite extreme when you go in. And this article has been, and the research by ProPublica, don't worry, the scholars have really gone after to say, no, it was doing exactly what it was supposed to do. And it's been absolutely further reviewed. And when you actually look at this, when you look at Compass, when you look at the products like the Arnold tool that's actually used here in Bernalillo County in New Mexico, we actually determine that there are a lot of holes and errors that are occurring, so much so that when you've got a product that defense attorneys and prosecutors across the nation are saying we've got real problems with this data and with these algorithms, you know that there's a problem, that this should not be used in all places. How do we think about race with this? Well, you and I all walk our daily lives with a racialized ideology. Every person we come across, we are asking and answering these questions in our head. Who are these people and how should they be treated? We're doing this all, I'm sorry, watch my time. We do this all the time. And with our early framings of modern stereotypes, right, we've got a population marked by enslavement, of Black Americans. We've got a population marked by exploitation, Native Americans. We've got Hispanics and Latinos who have been marked by conquest. We've got a population, people of Asian descent who've been marked by exclusion. And we even have a population that has been marked by assimilation. All of the work taken to take the white community and all of their various ethnicities and cultural practices and mushed into this thing that we call whiteness in the United States. And all of these early framings that have been codified in law have been double locked down in our data and in our algorithms. That we know that these crude historical depictions of Black Americans have actually been linked to the dehumanization of Black criminal suspects today, and that men with us because of their certain pigmentation are actually given harsher sentences. We know that women have been given harsher sentences because of their pigmentation. We know that Black children are seen as older and less innocent, and that these also play out into criminal justice sentencing. And all of this stuff is just getting documented and written into our laws and written into our laws and to our practices, so much so that we now have grave concerns, right? So when you look at the facial recognition software out of Michigan, that is determining within seconds, already has picked up 50 million driver's licenses, photos, and mugshots in the Michigan police database. We also know about the use of drones in Baltimore City, and there was actually a lawsuit aimed to stop Baltimore police from using war zone surveillance systems to spy on residents throughout the city of Baltimore. And the ACLU filed a lawsuit to stop them from testing it on over the 600,000 residents, tracking all of their outdoor movements. The imaging systems could photograph up to 32 square miles every second, allowing for slow motion reconstruction of virtually all outdoor movements. And we even know, and you may remember, this was one of my favorite things that ever popped up, but this was a webcam that didn't even see Black people. This was really interesting, and this came back, a Hewlett-Packard camera, and these were two employees at Best Buy who would walk in front of the camera, and they realized that the camera could not see Mr. Cryer, the Black American, though it could see his white counterpart. Well, why does this step up? Because we've already determined and discovered that this software does a horrible job, a criminal job in marking incorrectly people of darker skin. And when I say darker skin, it means anyone who doesn't fall out of one of the smallest spectrums for all of the pigmentation of people on our planet. MIT discovered that this facial recognition software marketed by Amazon misidentified darker skinned Black women as men a third of the time. It was returning false matches at a higher rate for Black Americans than white people, unless it was explicitly recalibrated. And the Florida Institute for Technology and the University of Notre Dame discovered that the single algorithm cannot be applied to both groups with equal accuracy. There's no way an algorithm used for white people would work as an algorithm that can be used for Black people. This is what we're dealing with right now, and we even have seen the gender and racial bias that's been found in Amazon's facial recognition technology, in other instances also. And we're not even just talking faces, but there's even the complexity of the racial divide in face recognition technologies. How many of you have ever wondered, boy, my Alexa just can never understand me. Boy, I have no clue why Siri has no clue what I'm saying. Well, 35% of the time, the technology could not determine the words being said by Black people. And this is and the racial disparities in automated speech systems. This is a really intense thing that's happening, and this technology is being used everywhere. We even discovered, and some of you may remember this from last year, the Banjo CEO uh, actually was associated with the Ku Klux Klan in his youth. He was involved in the shooting of a Tennessee synagogue. And what happens when the founders of companies actually have documented conscious and unconscious biases in the software they're creating? We know in technology that we've got feedback loop errors and concern, and computer scientists are always aware of this, right? Um, they can tend to run into these behaviors predicting the data, but they're not aware to be thinking about that last stage that I had on that original slide, like how is the algorithm doing? And this year's predictions affect next year's data. Does this actually end up further exacerbating the complexities, or is it actually being used to decrease it? And the predictive policing can reinforce historical patterns, leading to over-policing in some areas. We really can't do this in a vacuum. The tech community can't do it alone. The legal community can't do it alone. The social science communities can't do it alone. The community can't talk about it without, and all of them, the humans, the algorithms, the social, historical, legal, political context, all of it needs to be embedded at every step. Now, I've got a couple of concerns that rise up. Actually, I want to end up skipping this, but it comes to this idea of justice, right? When we sit back and slow down and we ask ourselves, what is justice? How does it actually shake out? And, when you're in this space of notions of justice, the mathematical proofs that algorithms cannot simultaneously be fair to individuals and to populations if the distribution of guilty and innocent people are not exactly equal across the populations. And we know that even at our best, when we understand that there are complexities, and many of you have seen this image where one of our solutions is, if everyone is treated equally, we don't get to the justice and equity we're after. And even at our best, when we make these systems in place to help others get a leg up or to be able to get to equality, we can still look to break and change some of our barriers that are being used in this. And it's constantly being understood that even at our best to do this, we're still leaving some people out. And when we're still looking at it even further, we're not understanding how complex it is to even understand our data points and where they come from. I like to play with this notion of justice. I'm giving a talk for the New Mexico Supreme Court justices and the Court of Appeal judges and all the trial court judges to talk about what justice actually looks like. And these are all instances that matter. And I'll wrap it up with one of my favorite films. Some of you may have, hopefully all of you were raised right and got to see Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And there's that scene where they use AI, the Simmons Systems 4004. And he asks the machine to tell him where he can get that Wonka bar that will have the golden ticket. And the machine won't tell him because it says that wouldn't be fair, right? Someday the machines will be the version of our best selves. But we're not there yet. We're not there yet. We're working to get there. I talk way too much. I ran all out of time, but I hope you are feeling encouraged to stand up and use your spaces. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts, and feel free to show your cameras and tell me where I'm crazy or where I'm missing things or where we can go next as a community. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate you.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Sonia.
I talk way too much. I said, it's already too
No,
much.
no, it's not that. It's not that. It's like trying to absorb it. I don't want to take up time from anyone else that want to sort of ask questions while we have you here. But thank you. Oh my goodness. I'm like sitting around and just not realizing what you don't know. And as you begin to realize that, it's like, what do I do? Where do I start? Like now, like what can I do? Like I'm not in tech, I'm not in legal. Like what am I supposed to do?
So that's a really great question. For every legal paper, we're not just allowed to complain about all the broken things and just leave a burning house. We're supposed to learn, give examples or explain what are some recommendations. One area is that you could absolutely talk to your legislators, right, and find out what technology is being used. You can absolutely say, is there transparency being used? Are we using this crazy Compass software in our correction system in our state? We found out that we are in New Mexico, right? And I'm working with state legislators who are like, whoa, we got to either get information on it or pull it out. My argument, pull it right out. We don't need it. It's got too many problems to be used in those determinations. You can also contact your federal legislators. and really encourage them to not use proprietary third-party softwares that don't have transparency. If we can't get into the data, then don't use it, and really encourage that kind of space. And all of those things that they tell you, you can, on an individual level, you can at least give yourself a little tinfoil hat, right? Start to practice some basic security measures. Don't let your phone track every step you do, because that data is going to be uploaded and used in some kind of way that may not be to your purpose. Really think long and hard if you want 23andMe to have you and your family in the database. And I've met people that are like, I don't care if my third cousin's crazy and committing crimes, I hope they find him. Or you can say, yeah, if you didn't find him through using traditional policing measures, then maybe you shouldn't be going after my cousin. And I don't want to put my children at risk for being picked up by the police for something that can be on some. Anyway, those are some of my ideas. So you can protect your own privacy to the best of your own ability. Almost impossible if you're using Gmail just as a basis. You've already agreed to give up so many privacies. But there are some personal privacy things you can do, and we can also encourage the federal government to go after transparency in their contracts that are being used.
Well, thank you. I'm gonna make sure there's space for if anyone else has questions, or I see some thank yous in the chat for spending the time with us. Okay, so Sonia, thank you so much for being here with us today and for enlightening all of us. I recorded. Hopefully that was okay with you. First, yeah,
Yeah.
beforehand. If not, okay. We'll probably put it up on YouTube just to get people that didn't have the opportunity, because this is the middle of the day, to be able to come and really. Oh, please don't have sleep this night. I'm sorry. I want you to
Yeah,
sleep. It's
and
okay.
before you know, everybody's gonna have that tinfoil hat. My goal is to. I did, like I said, I didn't know I'd be a tinfoil hat person, yet here I am. No, I want to. I'll invite you, and I'll send the link to Natalie. But I'll be hosting a talk back related to the film Coded Bias. Hopefully, maybe some of you already saw it on PBS and on Netflix. It's so good that Netflix has made it available to everyone. Everyone go and watch their documentary. And it's referring to all of the ways about algorithm and bias. So I'll be doing a talk on that next Tuesday. Natalie, I'll send the link if anybody wants to be bored in the at middle of that'll be the middle of our day. But I'll be doing it through the University of New Mexico's Department of Engineering Student Services. And kind of talking about some of these issues of bias. So I'll share that link. But I thank all of you for coming midday to let me talk way too fast and way too much.
Thank you, Soria. And again, thank you everybody for showing up. We'll be doing some more Beyond 21 Day talks as they continue to roll out. And thank you, Sonia, for being a trailblazer and the first one that does this with us. I loved it and appreciate it so much.
Thank you for having me. Sorry, I never know what to trim because I had like 8 things. I was like, don't tell them that, it's too much. But I appreciate all of you. Thank you for letting me. Yeah. Thanks for letting me talk about it a little bit.
I appreciate it. Thank you. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day. And same to you, Sonia.
Bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.